ouch. And Bernard, one of the things that hurt about that was people were going, hey, wait a minute, is he talking about Cuomo? Is he saying Cuomo is talking without knowing what he's talking about?
I really don't think anybody thought that he was taking a shot at Cuomo. The American
people probably thought he was taking a shot at Cuomo.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the Attorney General, but the American people were understandably outraged about AIG. Having said that, we need to move beyond anger, frustration, and hysteria to really get down to the brass tacks of solving this economy. I don't think the American people elected Barack Obama because he's a hothead, because he's overly emotional. This is a cerebral guy. Okay, he's not going to get along like George Bush did on sort of trying to be everybody's friend. He's not going to empathize with everybody.
Trying to be everybody's friend. He had no friends.
No, but don't forget that in the first administration, into the second administration, he sort of tried to chum the media and chum the American public along. And he's not going to connect.
He said that
like
he wanted to
did.
know his facts before he spoke. Dana, you've been at the White House. For goodness sake, when you're President of the United States, you have to speak on a split second about major issues, do you not?
Well, I think the whole reason that we had the conversation last week is because when the White House was asked the question of what did you know and when did you know it, they got the first set of answers wrong because they didn't have all the facts at their fingertips. So they didn't have it right away. And so they needed to then regroup. And that's why the newscast led every single newscast for an entire week on this subject.
It started on the president on Monday. David Axelrod, evidently, and Rahm Emanuel said, don't make AIG a major issue. President did anyway, so we'll see where it goes. But, Dana, I got to ask you about when a press conference happens like this, is it a mistake that the Washington Post and the New York Times and other Wall Street Journal do not get called on a primetime address? Tell me what the theory is behind that.
Well, it's going to be up to them as to how they decide to call on reporters. I'm glad to see some different reporters get some questions, but I think calling on those traditional media outlets is still important, and I think that they could have been tossed a question, maybe cut back on the follow-ups, and at least grant the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, others, those major papers. It's not that he didn't call on reporters that were to ask him hard questions. He did.
Yeah,
but I think there's something to be said about traditional media, and you can mix the new with the traditional, in my opinion.
Yeah, traditional media had been hard on Barack Obama in the last week, so that may have had something to do with it.
I think having publications like Stars and Stripes, I think having publications like Stars and Stripes involved in the conversation, Ebony Magazine involved in the conversation. I mean, finally, he's Univision, which is incredibly important. And finally, he calls on a publication like the Washington Times rather than Washington Post. You guys should be applauding that, not criticizing.
No, I'm asking. I'm asking if there's a tactic behind it.
I think it's to build as broad a coalition as he possibly can.
But, Dana, don't you think it is a mistake to not call on the Wall Street Journal, the preeminent financial newspaper in the country? The president's going to be on TV talking about what a financial malaise we're in, how he's going to dig us out of the hole and all that stuff.
Look, if it were me advising him, I think I probably would have cut down on the follow-ups, and I would have gone ahead and called on Stars and Stripes and Ebony. I think that's great. I think the toss to Univision was a little bit transparent in that they were trying to talk about the topic that they introduced yesterday in regards to the drug cartels. I think it was a little bit too obvious, and the other reporters, you could almost feel it coming through the television. They were chomping at the bit to get back to the economy. But if it were me, I would have taken those questions from them because I still think that they play an incredibly important role in today's media.
All right. Well, we just heard from Bernard and Dana. We'd like to hear from you. Email us. How do you think the president did last night? Friends@foxnews.com. These two and us will be back in 2 minutes.
All right, first no waterboarding, then Gitmo is going to be closed, and Iran, I want to be your friend. Now this email from the Department of Defense to Pentagon staffers. It says, quote, this administration prefers to avoid using the term long war or global war on terror. Please use overseas contingency operation. Did we win the war on terror?
It's over.
I guess so. Dana Perino, Bernard Whitman, both sides of this issue. First off, Dana, you asked me in the break, is this true? What's your reaction?
Well, I don't know if it's true or not. I'd be kind of surprised. An overseas contingency operation could be anything, such as dropping off some food parcels. I'm concerned every day that we get. If it is true, I think it follows in a possibly disturbing pattern. Like a couple of weeks ago, Janet Napolitano said we weren't going to call things terrorist acts anymore. They were man-caused disasters. And as you water down the language, it might make people feel a little bit better here, but let me tell you something. It does not do anything to tell our enemies that we are serious about this fight, and they think they're in a war. And I think that we better continue to be on that footing.
Bernard, this is stupid, isn't it?
Well, there's a number of people in the military intelligence community that have said all along that calling this a global war on terror both magnifies the threat and takes a whole bunch of disparate organizations, unifies them, and makes it appear like we're dealing with a bigger enemy than we actually are.
What do you think of the new name?
I think it was made up by bureaucrats. So if I were going to sort of name this, I wouldn't have picked that.
An overseas contingency operation isn't made up by bureaucrats?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it
that's
does
the most
sound like it's...
bureaucratic phrase I've ever heard.
No, I agree with you, Dana. I think it is overly bureaucratic, but I do think we need to make a clean break. And by the way, it wasn't this president that declared the war is over. It was the last president who prematurely declared that.
What? Global war on terror?
No, the mission is accomplished. I don't think anybody is saying that, but I think we are saying we've got to make a clean break with the last administration.
I think you're exactly right that they had to make a clean break. Whether or not it's the right decision is a whole other thing to debate. All right, Dana, we have to get to this sound bite, which of course is from Robert Gibbs, the press secretary for Barack Obama, about you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I believe that was added when they renovated the briefing room that I'm standing in a few years ago. And when I walked out there, I could tell the podium was shorter than normal. I think it was probably set for the height for Dana Perino, the previous press secretary.
Did you happen to see that, Dana, where the podium was too low for Robert Gibbs?
No, I hadn't seen that. But, you know, I had a situation similar when I took over for Tony Snow. The podium was much too high for me, and I had to stand on a box that was quite large. So hopefully they've adjusted it for Robert so that he feels like he's a little bit more comfortable behind there.
There you go. All right, Bernard and Dana, we thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
You bet.